My name's Lok. I run the developer relations team in Avalara. And for the next 20 minutes, I just want to share with you how wonderful our business is, how wonderful and exciting sales tax is, and that we build a business around it, right? How many of you deal in sales tax or actually come across any sales tax needs? Some of you. Okay, so sales tax is actually very, very complicated. It's hard. It's a hard thing to nail down. Now, we speak to a lot of developers and a lot of customers, and we ask them, so how do you solve your sales tax needs? They say, well, it's very easy. Just give us a zip code, and we'll look up this huge, gigantic table, and you tell you what the sales tax rate is. Actually, that's not true. In the US alone, there are 12,000 taxing jurisdictions. This map, every single color point on this map is a different taxing jurisdiction with its own taxing rules and taxing rates, set up by the different cities and counties and states. Now, this is not all of it, right? If we zoom down into this is the famous demo that we like to show. If you zoom down into Denver, for instance, there's this area in Arapahoe where the different color zones are different taxing jurisdictions. This is not in a predetermined order. It's all based on what the city wants to do, right? So imagine this light gray area here. We have a generic 3.25% tax rate. This is generic, not taking into account item taxability, right? This area here is 3.25%. Now you go a couple of hundred meters north, and it's now a different city district called Aurora City District with a 7% tax rate. But notice this small purple square inside of this gray area. That one area is covered by two different city jurisdictions, Arapahoe and Aurora, and it's an 8% sales tax rate. Why? Why is it like that? So if you zoom down or if you drive there, you can actually see that it's a telecommunications building run by a commercial entity. So that's why both cities want the money, want the revenue from that business, right? So this is all determined by the cities and the counties, not determined by some zip code. It's actually rooftop level, right? So you need to be able to calculate sales tax as accurate as rooftop level. So let's take a look at some more funny things about sales tax. We found in our dealings with different cities, the smallest sales tax jurisdiction ever is in Kansas. It's in a city called Hoisington, Kansas. And this one building has a 0.5% more tax rate than the buildings around it. And it's a Subway. So I guess it's because it's a chain, right? They make more money than local businesses, and they want to promote local businesses, so the local businesses around it have a lower tax rate, which is pretty funny. There's also a special barbecue sales taxing jurisdiction, okay? And it's actually called out, and this is in Missouri. So talking about food, let's take a look at food stuff, which is pretty interesting because food items have very interesting taxing rules and tax rates. So this is a famous one, right? I don't know how many of you know this. In New York, if you buy a bagel that's uncut, you're exempt from tax. You don't need to pay sales tax on that item. But if you get somebody to slice it for you, then you have to pay 8.875% tax because it's a service fee, right? So what else about food? Candy. How many of you love candy? Candy in most states are exempt from tax. Oh, well, it's actually taxable in most states, sorry. Except if you like Twix. Why? Why is Twix exempt from tax? Well, if you look at the ingredients for Twix, you see that they list flour as one of the top 3 main ingredients, and that makes it a food item, not candy. Okay, so next time, if you ever want to make candy, just add flour in it, and then sell it as a food item. Right, what else? Let's take a look at some more crazy taxability rules, right? There are a lot more examples here. In Colorado, if you were to buy a cup, it's exempt from tax, but if you have the cup with a lid and a straw, then it's taxable, right? In Nebraska, if you're lucky enough to live in Nebraska with a huge outdoor pool, and if you want cleaning services, then you're exempt from tax. But if you have an indoor pool, then you're screwed. Then you have to pay for tax, okay? If you are chartering a flight, for instance, in New York, and if you include the pilot as part of that charter, then you're exempt from tax. But if you rather fly the plane yourself, then you have to pay sales tax, which is funny, you think of it, right? I guess it's to promote jobs in New York. In Pennsylvania, clothing items are exempt from tax. Most clothing items are exempt from tax. Unless you're in organized crime and you wear formal wear all the time, then you have to pay sales tax for the formal wear. So it's really complicated. If you look at the whole business of sales tax, I ask every accountant and they will tell you that it is supremely complicated and complex. We deal with about 150 million different addresses in the United States, 12,000 different jurisdiction rule sets. We have 10,000 sales, use, rental tax rates, 131,000 fuel tax scenarios, millions of products, services, exemptions, and all of this data changes about 1,000 times a year. So at any one time, a city or jurisdiction can just change a rule like that. And if you're an online retailer and if you're doing this on your own, seriously, that's hard. We have like 100 people in our company just monitoring these rules changes, and we'll update our content engine accordingly. Right? So a little bit of background about Avalara. We were formed in 2004. We are about 1,000 people now, based in Seattle. Our headquarters is in beautiful Bainbridge Island. If you're ever up there, you should visit. And our founders saw this opportunity to take all this complex data and then route it through a content engine and provide access to an API. How simple is that? So we basically solved the problem of calculating sales tax, filing and remitting sales tax. We even do filing for you. So at the end of the day, you don't need to cut checks to all these different jurisdictions. You pay us a fee, and we do everything for you, right? So we sort of solved that problem. So this is how we build our engine. Obviously, we work with the different governments, the federal, the state level, the counties, and the city level to think about the rules changes, item code changes, sales tax rate changes, and so forth. And we put that into our content engine. It includes all the boundaries as well. So we have a geo-coded content engine where we can actually specify by latitude and longitude the shape of the jurisdiction, okay? And then based on that content, we build a wonderful engine on top that provide tax determination very accurately, rooftop level quality, document management and compliance abilities. And then we build our products on top of that, right? Products that our customers can use. And what kind of customers do we have? Well, anybody who has any transactional business, whether it's online or offline, that needs sales tax calculation, those are our customers. And it wasn't until a few years ago that we built and provide access to this content through an API. So we have a SOAP and REST-based API now that you can call. And we work with a lot of partners, with over 400 different partners building over 400 different connector software to connect one piece of software that they own to our sales tax engine. So we have mobile point of sales partners, we have point of sale partners, ERP, e-commerce, all the big names, Microsoft, Sage, 3D Card, and so forth. So all our partners, well, these are just part of the partners that we have. So any customer that's doing their business on any of these platforms can very easily get sales tax calculation and remittance through their software, as part of their software, right? So in the typical flow, how would you call our API? It's actually mind-numbingly simple, right? If you look at it. From a developer perspective, it is just one or two API calls, and that's it. It's as simple as that, which I'll show you. So in a typical scenario, in a workflow, in an e-commerce scenario, you would have buyers going to the cart, adding stuff to the cart, and then once they're done, they want to pay for it. It goes to the shipping information, they put in an address, and then you want to give them the shipping rate and the sales tax rate, the final amount that you'll be charged. And that's when you make the first call to Avalara to get tax calculation, and we will tell you exactly how much to collect. And then you enter your payment information, and then when you confirm your order, you make a final call to Avalara and say that this is an invoice with a commit flag is true to commit that transaction and record it in our system. And that's it. And then if you ever have a return item where the user returns item, then you call a different method to return the item and so forth. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? So if you're looking at, so we've documented all our API calls, obviously, just as any SaaS-based company would do, they create a developer's page, right? So we created a developer page. I mean, just a few years ago, don't tell anybody, we were distributing our developer documents via PDF. If anybody sends an email, hey, how do I call the API? Where's the documentation? Here we go, here's your PDF. And we couldn't keep track of it. There were so many different versions of a PDF as our APIs changed. So we needed a central place, and now we've built a site, put all our documentation in multiple different languages for all our, well, programming languages, right? Not Chinese or and so forth, right? So we did that. We also published sample code. So in our experience working with developers, we see all kinds of developers, right? Those that are very good, those that want to be very good, and those that are very bad, right? And we've seen developers of all walks of life. Some developers will come and take a look at our API and say, great, this is easy, no problem, I'll get it done. Some of them will come and say, how do you make this call again? How do I do this in VB6? How do I do this in COBOL? And no joke, there are some customers who are still using VB6, they're still using COBOL, and some of them use AS400. They're still using those, and they're asking us for sample code to call API from those systems. And sometimes, business pressure, we have to comply, and so we have to create sample code and allow them to access and call our APIs using our library. So we've published libraries as well on our site based on priorities, obviously. We noticed that C#, Java, and PHP are the largest set of developers, the languages that most developers most use, with Ruby and JavaScript, the next few ones. They're getting very popular. And so here's a typical call. As with any REST-based API, every developer knows how to use curl, right? So you would call our URL with development.avalara.net with a JSON payload called getTextRequest.json and login a account number and a license key pair for a basic auth. And that's all you do. And in the payload, you have to specify just as any transactional document. So think of it as an invoice. What kind of information do you need in an invoice? Obviously, you need dates, you need company code, which is your company, who's your client, what is the document ID number, typically an invoice number. And detail level is interesting. Detail level basically tells our engine how detailed do you want the tax breakdown. Do you want just a summary, 9.25%? Or do you want the detailed breakdown of each individual taxing jurisdiction and what it covers and how much are they collecting from you? And we can do that as part of our tax calculation. So if you say tax, we'll give you the full detail. Commit is false if you're doing just tax calculation. If you want to commit a document, you just say commit it through, and what is your document type, and so forth. But what's more important to any document is addresses. In order to make an accurate tax calculation, you need 2 or more addresses. Origin address, where the sale is made or where you're shipping the item from, and destination address, where you're shipping it to. Right? So we'll allow you to send in an array of addresses and mark them by address code. And in the item level, we also accept an item array of individual items. You have item numbers, what your quantity is, what's your origin code, and what's your destination code. There are some instances where the sale is made in a different address, the item is shipped from a different warehouse, from a different state to a different location, and we take all of that into consideration as well. And we support tax codes, so basically codes that describe what an item is, whether it is a food item or whether it's a machinery or whatever you have. And we also support UPC codes. So you can send UPC codes as part of the tax code, and we will know exactly what rules to apply. So those are the line items. And when you make a successful call, we will return a JSON document that specifies, hey, this is a successful call. We will give you we will validate all your addresses, and we'll give you a normalized address, and we will tell you what jurisdiction code this address sits in, okay? And then we also tell you what the latitude and longitude is for that specific address, because it needs to be that accurate. So we will give you the normalized addresses after you call our service, and then the detailed breakdown of all the taxes. So for instance, in this jurisdiction code 17, it is a state sales tax jurisdiction with a rate of 6.25%. And then on top of that, you have a Cook County tax in Illinois for 0.075%, and so forth. So if you specify detail level as tax, we will return as much detail as you want. If you say detail level is summary, we'll just give you the summary, which is, in this case, right at the bottom here. So that's it. That's all you need to do. Call us with a document, return, and then you pass the document on your own and do whatever you want with it. So if you look at the whole business of e-commerce, it's just growing. It just grows every year, like 15 to 16% every single year. It's going to grow this year. It's grown this year. It's going to grow next year. So there's a huge, huge opportunity for developers to be in that business. And how? Basically by partnering with Avalara. Okay, we have a partnership program where if you were to build a connector, then you get part of the proceeds of all the transactions that go through that connector. So from a piece of software. So if you're in an open source community and you have a lot of business dealing with Drupal, for instance, and you build a connector for Drupal, then every single transaction that goes through, you get a cut of that. And so it's a huge opportunity for developers. As you can see, the code is so mind-numbingly simple. You can build integrations for all different commerce platforms, hopefully, right, that way. So I'll leave you with one quote. In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. But now you only have to worry about one, right? So thank you very much. Oh, anybody has any questions? Yes, we support VAT calculation in Europe, and now we're working on Brazil as well. Yep. Not everywhere, because not all countries have such complex taxing rules. I hear a question there about this T-shirt. We have tons of these T-shirts in our booth. Come and grab some. No? Okay, so thank you very much.